person that I feel like is time sensitive, I send a second copy, blind copy, another email of mine so that I can look on my phone and see it. But
Yeah.
no, it's totally fine. I was just going to.
Yeah, I'll do it this afternoon. And I had gotten in the habit of doing it like, the Thursday and Friday, which I need to get back to like right after that,
Yeah.
do the next one. But yeah, I just didn't this week. And
The other thing I was going to mention is your understanding of the booklet that you were texting me about last night. Do you think that's something that's approximately 40 pages? Is it?
well, that's a question for him. I don't know how in depth he wants me to go. I mean, he just.
Happy Tuesday. Welcome to Connection. We will begin this morning with our prayer of surrender. Spirit of truth, carry me where you will. Bring to me what you will. Take from me what you will. Awaken in me what you will. The Christ man is around me. The Christ mind is in me. The Christ power flows through me. And the Christ mystery exists as me. I believe it. I perceive it. And now I receive it. I am surrendered. Amen. And so it is. So today's devotion is a part 2. Is it? Yes. Yes. Yesterday, we went over in the morning devotion at 7 a.m., part 1, which was saving by playing. And today is part 2 of that, subtitled Jesus at Play. So here is the affirmation. Today, I am open to seeing a different perspective of Jesus. I am also available for a connection with God that encourages relationship, not fear. Okay, so you know how most of the paintings we see of Jesus, he's not smiling. He's very serious. I think probably one of the most famous paintings we see of Jesus is a depiction of him maybe in the Garden of Gethsemane, right as he's praying, right before he knows he's about to go to the cross. So we don't, and a lot of people feel that when it comes to matters of religion and spirituality, it's very serious. And you can't smile and you can't crack a joke because this is life or death. Don't you know? This is very serious business. But that is completely out of balance. And we also need some joy along the way. So let's read today our devotion about how saving by playing and having joy can help us. Jesus was born into an environment of death threats, Roman oppression, and religious rigidity. He narrowly escaped being executed as an infant, was eventually crucified by Roman officials, and seemed to be perpetually in a struggle with the religious order. Sounds like Jesus needed to play, and he did. Jesus was not far into Lila, and if from the devotion yesterday, we see that Lila is a word that means playful or joy. He had a playful side. Jesus' first miracle was not healing the sick, raising the dead, or feeding the hungry. His first miracle was turning water into wine at a wedding. So the wedding party already had wine. They just drank it all. And Jesus provided them with more. Jesus basically was the first over-server. So Jesus related the kingdom of God to little children playing and taught that if we do not learn to play as the children, we cannot enter the kingdom. Jesus recreated, relaxed, refreshed in Bethany with his closest friends, Lazarus, Mary, and Martha. Furthermore, Jesus was unconcerned and unimpressed with long prayers and serious formalities of religious expression. He cautioned us not to be overly preoccupied with ritual, robes, and religious titles. When we connect to this lighter side of Jesus, perhaps we can conceive or relate to God not from fear and awe, but from love and devotion. When we learn to be playful, we signal to the universe that we are not only saved from God's wrath, but safe in God's love. I love that. All right, our ending prayer, if you'd like to say it with me, is Joyful Spirit. Today I will play in your presence without fear or reservation. Amen. So let's learn to be serious about our joy, because even in the Bible it says right there, what is our strength? The joy of the Lord. Didn't say our seriousness, our devotion, our sacrifice, our suffering. None of that, the Bible said, was our strength. Our strength is the joy of the Lord. So today, we're going to take it back a few years and talk about something that we've talked about before that I was reminded of a couple of times lately by things that my brother has said. A few days ago in one of our devotions, he mentioned the famous Bruce Lee quote, "Be like water." And then this past Sunday, he spent a few minutes talking about a flexible faith and how it's important to flow. So I dug up some notes from a previous teaching and added some information to them, and that's what we're going to talk about today, being like water and having a flexible faith. So let's start with a few quotes. The first one is from Lauren Isley. "If there is magic on this planet, it is contained in water." Okay, next, water is the driving force of all nature. Leonardo da Vinci, which, we've talked about this before too. You can live far longer without food than you can without water. You have to have water pretty regularly for your body to continue functioning. So water is very, very important. Next, this quote is by Lucretius. "The fall of dropping water wears away the stone." Now, when you think of the concept of water, you think of soft, you think of flowing, you think of light. When you think of stone, you think of hard and stable. But what happens to stone after years of water drops on it? The water wins and the stone loses. You know, the entire Grand Canyon was formed millions of years ago by water. So think of the strength of that water. But one of the reasons it is strong is because it flows and is not rigid like stone. Okay, next, human nature is like water. It takes the shape of its container. Next, the mind is like water. When it's turbulent, it's difficult to see. When it's calm, everything becomes clear. And lastly, one more from Leonardo da Vinci. In time and with water, everything changes. So, the quote that I mentioned a little earlier by Bruce Lee, "Be like water," it's always been attributed to Bruce Lee, but the original concept came from the writings of an ancient philosopher named Lao Tzu in something that he wrote called the Tao Te Ching. So Bruce Lee, of course, was probably the greatest martial artist who ever lived. And when asked about how it was possible for him to move his body in the way that he did, this was his answer. He said, "Be like water." But the concept extended to his mind as well. He said, "Empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. You put water into a cup and it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle and it becomes the bottle. You put it into a teapot and it becomes that. Water can flow and it can crash. Be water, my friend." So that is the entire quote from Bruce Lee. So before we get into the lessons that we can learn from the Tao Te Ching about becoming like water, I want to read you something by Andrew Martin that's talking about how important it is to get to the place where we are at peace with our own internal navigation system, with that still small voice inside of us that belongs to, as Bruce Lee mentioned, our formless higher self, that part of us that is not bound by our physical body. Let's begin with why we need it. Why is it even important to have this personal inner GPS? Well, because we live in a world of duality and free will, and therefore, whether we believe and accept it or not, everything in our life is a result of some decision we've made. Also, again, whether we believe and accept it or not, regardless of how it feels sometimes, we always have a choice. Anytime you feel trapped, just go back to the knowledge that there is always a choice. Now, my brother just did a whole series on free will and how we don't have to choose, we don't have to use our free will in order to become saved. We just are saved. Jesus just did that once and for all. It is a fact. The salvation of mankind is not at the mercy of our human free will. But we do still have free will for pretty much everything else in our lives. And Andrew Martin is talking here about a very important choice we must all make at some point. he's saying this in the context of some oracle cards that he's describing. You know, they have these decks of these cards with thoughts on them, and then they're interpreted. So that's what he's doing in this video. And so the first card that he pulls up is called Suffering in Silence. And the picture on it is of a woman sitting on top of a little cliff in a desert environment. And it just looks very formidable and inhospitable and even dangerous. And there's these two big, formidable, mountain peaks off in the distance that she's looking at in front of her. And here is his interpretation of this scene. He says, "Do you remember those books from when you were a kid that were part of that genre, Choose Your Own Adventure?" Okay, so there were these books, if you're not familiar, where you would read up to a certain point, and then it would ask you to choose this path or that path. And depending on which one you chose, it would tell you which page to go to. And then the story would continue along this path if you chose this page. And if you went to another page, it took you down another path, and there were two different outcomes to the book. So each path and each of your choices had a different outcome. So your choice here with this card is, are you ready to let go of suffering in silence? Are you ready to stop playing the victim? Are you ready to stop pretending that you're powerless? Are you ready to stop pointing your finger at everybody else as the source of your problems? There's this idea that says in order to learn, pain is necessary. And I don't buy that. This is him talking. But I say that as well. Certainly, pain, struggle, and suffering are a part of the human experience that sometimes seem inevitable and unavoidable, and they are certainly an effective way to learn, but they are not the only way to learn. Now, time out. In the past, I have referred to another talk of Andrew Martin's that I disagreed with a little, where he was making a similar point. And I think I said something to the effect of, yes, lessons can be learned without suffering and struggle, but they don't necessarily make as big of an impact as those ones that hurt a little. And then I followed that by saying, I don't know why that's the case, and I wish that it weren't, but it just seems to be true. If there's a little bit of pain involved, it seems to the lesson seems to make a bigger impact on you. Like if you fall down, but you don't get hurt that badly, maybe you don't change anything about the way you're moving, physically or whatever. But if you have a bad fall, you're going to be a little more careful the next time because it hurt. So that's just the human nature. The lessons we learn from pain are sometimes a little bit more impactful, but we don't have to have pain in order to learn. So I still believe that. However, I also believe you can reach a level of consciousness where your lessons can be learned gently, but it's a pretty high level, and you have to have done some inner work in order to get there. So I just wanted to make that clear before going on so it wouldn't seem like I'm contradicting something I said in the past. He continues, do you have to be in pain to learn? Do you have to struggle to grow? Only you can answer those questions. And as I just said, unfortunately, many people do because they haven't put the work in necessary on themselves to be on a level of consciousness to learn any other way than through pain. Okay, we're going to talk about that a little bit too. Some people learn very easily just by watching someone else go down a road, and they see what happened to the other person and they say, oh, maybe I won't do that. But other people are just hard-headed, and they're going to and it doesn't matter how many examples they've had that this is a bad decision, they got to know for themselves, so they go down that road. All right, so and that just depends on your level of consciousness. All right, so this is the first place we're going to stop and make a connection with water. There's a song that we sing here called Welcome into This Place, and we have sung it here for many, many years. And the original lyrics, the way I first learned the song years ago, was welcome into this place, welcome into this broken vessel. But some years after that, we changed that line to say welcome into this open vessel. because we wanted to move away from the idea that we are, as humans, inherently broken and sinful. At that time, we were just coming into the revelation that we are not born in sin and shaped in iniquity, that we are not worthless, lowly wretches, always in need of salvation. So it made sense to us at that point in time to say instead, rather than being broken vessels, it made sense at that time for us to say we're open vessels. But that's only coming from one perspective. That's only one layer of meaning. And as we know, everything in life has layer upon layer of different meaning. So as we sang that song recently, I was reminded of the original way we used to sing it. Welcome into this broken vessel. And a thought occurred to me. Yes, it is the optimal situation for us to invite God's presence into our lives of our own free will, to say, welcome into this vessel of mine that is open to your guidance, to your wisdom, to your love. However, if we're not open to that, sometimes the circumstances of life have to give us a little nudge, okay? Yes, we have free will, and we can make our own choices. But if we continue to make choices that go against our true nature, which is our divine nature, and as I said a few weeks ago, if we continually break the laws of the universe that God set in place, then, of course, if we choose to continue to go down a path that leads us away from our true self, which is our higher self, our Christ self, then nature itself has to do something to bring us back into balance or to get us on a better path. Have you ever heard the phrase that nature is self-correcting? That's what it means. Life itself will always try to bring balance back where there is imbalance. And we can fight that if we want to, but that makes for a very rough life and a very difficult path. So like I said before, Spirit will tap you lightly on the shoulder. It will whisper in a still small voice, choose this path. And if you don't listen, then it has to get a little louder until the tap becomes a punch or a slap and the whisper becomes a scream. So very similar is this concept of open versus broken. You can open your heart and your mind and your life to the leading of the Spirit within you, to your higher self, or you can be broken. It's your choice. And again, it's not because God is so narcissistic that he will punish you for not doing it his way, but it's because there are always going to be consequences for going against divine universal laws. It's just like a dam breaking. A dam can only hold water back for so long, and it can only hold a certain amount at a certain pressure before it just gives way. Once the volume and the strength of the water surpasses that of the dam, it will break. And as I said a few moments ago, water always wins in the end. Just ask anyone who lives in New Orleans. Water always wins. So water symbolizes spirit. The water or the spirit within you knows that you are a divine being. And as such, it wants you to choose the path that leads you toward that realization of your own divinity. It's like the stream that naturally flows to the river that then continues on to the ocean. God is the ocean, and we are all streams that come from the ocean and will eventually make our way back to it. And any dam that we put up in our life that would impede that natural flow will eventually be broken. So the only question is, will you open the gate willingly, or will you wait for the water to break it down? All right, back to Andrew. I'll repeat those last few lines from him. He says, do you have to be in pain to learn? Do you have to struggle to grow? Only you can answer those questions. Okay, so it's up to you. Will you open up to the leading of the Spirit willingly, or have to wait for your choices and your decisions to break you? He then, Andrew Martin, moves to a different card that he describes as the alternative choice to suffering in silence. And remember, he's doing all of this in the context of these choose your adventure type of books that you can read to a certain point and then you get to choose which adventure you're going to go on. He's saying that suffering in silence, where there's a picture of a woman sitting on a cliff in a dry desert valley with two steep formidable mountains in front of her, that's one path you can choose. But then he describes a second card, which again is the alternative choice. And this card is called Fulfillment of Wishes. And it depicts a person that instead of being on a cliff in the desert is standing on a huge green lily pad looking like plant in between two gorgeous waterfalls, representing the masculine and the feminine on either side, with a chest full of treasure sitting in front of him. So let's not forget what we were just talking about, the significance of water, which is it is representative of spirit. So in this card, it's represented by two flowing waterfalls, which means the person pictured on the card is choosing to follow the guidance of spirit in their life. So he continues on talking about this choice between these two different paths. One where you're flowing with the water, with the spirit, and one where you've gotten so far away from the water, or you've built so many dams around you in your life that are blocking and resisting the flow of spirit that you are now in a desert. He says every soul comes here with a laundry list of things they want to experience and learn. And you can learn to bake that cake in a 5-star kitchen or in a roach and rat infested kitchenette. It's up to you. Either way, you're going to learn because that's what you came here to do. How you learn, though, is up to you. The quality of your experience is your choice. Option 1 is suffering in silence. Or you can say, okay, I'm at the bottom. The only way I can go from here is up. And you can ask Spirit to remind you how to learn from the upward spiral instead of through pain, suffering, and struggle. Ask Spirit to help you know how to learn through connection, flow, ease, and expansion. Now, doesn't that sound better than pain, struggle, and suffering? It does to me. Ask Spirit to let your learning partners be joy and fulfillment, excitement, creativity, and collaboration, rather than partners in pain. I love what he's about to say next. And we're all familiar with those relationships where the only time you get together is to talk about how miserable you are. Misery loves company. So you go out together and get drunk or eat too much or buy too much and continue to numb yourselves by bouncing your respective misery off each other, only making it bigger within both of you. And you leave the evening saying, yeah, we had such a great talk. They totally get me and know how I feel. When really all you did was validate each other's victim story. Woo, that is heavy. That is some truth right there. Those are not friends. Those are partners in pain. The other option is to choose a different path. When you choose to go toward your higher self, all of a sudden, your partners become beauty and wisdom and power, and you literally have a chest full of everything you need right in front of you. So which track will you choose? Which adventure will you embark on? Okay, that was some wonderful, wonderful wisdom from Andrew Martin. Now we're going to move ahead and dig a little deeper into this holy book or ancient book of philosophy that I mentioned earlier called the Tao Te Ching, where this concept, be like water, comes from. Because being like water and mimicking the way that it moves and behaves is really a good way to make sure that you're following your internal navigation system that will assist you in making the most beneficial choices in your life. So we're going to begin with a talk by a man named Raymond Tang, who has a lot of insight into this particular verse of the Tao Te Ching. And this verse actually states, this is how he summarizes it. The highest good is like water. Water gives life to the 10,000 things and does not strive. It flows in places men reject, and so is like the Tao, which in English, that word Tao means the way. In dwelling, be close to the land. In meditation, go deep into the heart. In dealing with others, be gentle and kind. In speech, be true. In ruling, be just. In business, be competent. In action, watch the timing. No fight, no blame. So that's one interpretation. In a minute, we'll hear it a little differently. This was something that was written in the Chinese language 2,600 years ago. So there have been a lot of various interpretations of it over the years, just like the Bible. So here are some thoughts about that passage from this man, Raymond Tang. He says, you may know this feeling. You wake up to multiple unread notifications on your cell phone. Your calendar is already packed with meetings, sometimes double and triple booked. You feel engaged. You feel busy. In fact, you feel productive. But at the end of it all, it still feels like something is missing. You try to figure out what it is, but before you do, the next day comes and it all starts again. That was how I felt 2 years ago. I felt stressed. I felt anxious. I felt a bit trapped. The world around me was moving very quickly and I didn't know what to do. Okay, so he was at a place where he had a choice to make. Was he going to continue on down that path that he was currently on, or was he going to use his free will to make a different choice? I started looking for answers, he says. I spoke to my friends, coworkers, and family. I read many self-help books, but I couldn't find anything that was satisfactory. In fact, the more self-help books I read, the more stressed and anxious I became. Now, sometimes that happens because these books set this goal, and if you're not in the place where you can get there, then all that does is make you feel like you failed at yet one more thing. He says, it was like I was feeding my mind junk food and was becoming mentally obese. So I want to stop right here for a minute and focus on what he's saying. He is at a crossroads in his life. He feels like he can't keep traveling down the same path he's been on, but everything he's doing to try to get onto another path isn't working because for whatever reason, he's not being able to put any of the information that he's taking in into practice. There's a dam there that's blocking it somehow. He's just reading and reading and reading, and his mind is getting fatter and fatter and fatter. And keeping with our analogy today, the water behind that dam is just building and building and building and getting higher and higher. So he was about to give up when he found this book called the Tao Te Ching, which he said was the shortest of the books he read. So it contained the least amount of information, but it was exactly what he needed to read to get him out of this valley of indecision. Reading it provided him with an alternate path and then a way to navigate it, because that's important. Sometimes you can see the path, like he was talking about. You can read all the books, you see the path, but just seeing the path is not getting you on the path. And until you get on the path, you can't get to the end of the path. So he then reads this passage that he describes as making chills run up his spine, and it was the one about water. He reads, "The supreme goodness is like water. It benefits all things without contention. In dwelling, it stays grounded. In being, it flows to depths. In expression, it is honest. In confrontation, it stays gentle. In governance, it does not control. In action, it aligns to timing. It is content with its nature and therefore cannot be faulted." So then he says, ever since the first day I read these words, I've been trying to apply the concepts to my day-to-day life. And there are 3 main lessons I've learned so far. They have helped me find greater fulfillment in almost everything that I do. The first is humility. When water flows through a riverbed, it stays low, helps all the plants along the banks grow, and provides nourishment for all the surrounding animal life. It does all this without drawing any attention to itself. It has no need for reward or recognition. It is humble, but without its contribution, life as we know it would not exist. This humility taught me the following. Instead of acting like I know what I'm doing or that I have all the answers, it's perfectly okay to say, I don't know. So how about that? He came to the same conclusion that we have. I want to learn more, and I need help. With this humble mindset, I was able to form richer connections with the people around me. All streams eventually flow to the ocean because it is lower than them. When you stay low, when you are humble, it is easier for things to flow to you. Have you ever thought about it that way? I never thought about it that way. But when you don't have to always be up here, look at me, see what I'm doing, clap for me. no, it almost makes people that would have wanted to give you something say, ooh. But when you stay humble, you know what I'm saying? Like sometimes you really would want to do something, and then you hear them talking, you go, no, I'm not going to help you. So, and that's human nature. But he says if you're staying humble, it's so much easier for things to flow to you. The second lesson I learned from water is about harmony. If we think about water flowing toward a rock, when it reaches the rock, it simply flows around it. It doesn't get upset. It doesn't get angry. It doesn't get agitated. When faced with an obstacle in its path, somehow water finds a solution without force and without conflict. When I began to think about that, I realized why I had been feeling stressed out and anxious in the first place. Instead of working in harmony with my environment, I was fighting against it. I was trying to force things to change because I was consumed by the need to succeed and to prove myself. This only made me more frustrated. By simply shifting my focus from trying to achieve more and be more successful to trying to achieve more harmony, I immediately felt calm and focused. I asked questions like, will this action bring me greater harmony and bring harmony to my environment? Does this action align with my true nature? Again, does this action align with my true divine self, or is it taking me away from it? In this way, I became more comfortable being my true self. Work then became easier because I stopped focusing on things I cannot control, and I stopped fighting with myself. I learned to work with my environment instead of against it in order to solve problems. Nature does not hurry, yet everything gets accomplished. Remember last week I said one of the things I hate more than anything in the world is that feeling of having to be in a hurry. And so I'm thinking, that doesn't mean I'm lazy. That means I'm in line with my divine nature, which never gets in a hurry. It's all about divine timing. That's the Tao Te Ching's way of describing the power of harmony. Just as water is able to find a solution without force or conflict, I believe we can find a greater sense of fulfillment in our endeavors by shifting our focus away from achieving more success to achieving more harmony. All right, so there was a whole lot in that second lesson. I want to break it down a little and give a few examples of how we can utilize that philosophy right now with some things that are going on around us. So he's talking about how water behaves when it comes up against an obstacle in its path. What lesson can we learn from water in this instance, and how does that translate to our behavior? For this, I'm going to go back to Andrew Martin. This is what he has to say about water and how we can become like water when we face obstacles. Water is the embodiment of perfect balance between the masculine and the feminine. Remember the card with the two waterfalls? Okay. And also our stabilizing statements. You have to have both of them to combine in the middle to be stable. I also heard this guy talking the other day. This is a real interesting guy. I don't agree by a long shot with everything he says, but he's very interesting, and he's got this whole new philosophy that he talks about. And he was talking about the this idea that if you get out of if that the whole, he thinks the earth was formed out of an imbalanced thought. That's what he believes. And so the entire story of humanity is spirit trying to bring it back in balance, because it was formed out of what he calls an asymmetrical thought. It did not have anything on the other side to balance it, so it's been out of balance, and that's what our whole job is trying to bring balance back to this realm. Interesting. It's interesting to think about. So he says, water is the embodiment of the perfect balance between masculine and feminine, of the receptive, receiving, and the assertive, acting. Because water takes the shape of whatever container it's in, but does not get attached to the container. We can look at water in a glass and think, wow, that glass is really controlling that water. But not really, because the minute you turn the glass to the side, the water pours right out. The water never tries to hang on to its container. Water is not resistant. Water is simultaneously receptive and assertive. existing in whatever container surrounds it, whether it's a riverbed or a swimming pool. The container only forms it for the moment, and it never confuses itself with the container. And if while flowing down the river it encounters a big rock, the water doesn't stop and have a breakdown. Can you imagine if every time there was a rock in a riverbed, the water just stopped? It just moves around it. It goes over and under and around it at the same time. And over time, it dissolves it and then goes right through it. All right, so I want to stop right here and apply this principle to something that was happening a few years ago that I found in some notes of mine that was a really big deal in the news at the time that caught my attention. And it was this baby formula shortage. Does anybody remember when that was all over the news a couple years ago that we were running out of baby formula? So they were showing all the empty grocery store shelves, and they were interviewing these young mothers who were wringing their hands over this. And not to be too insensitive here, but my first impression was, what is all this whining about? Babies have been being born for thousands upon 10,000s of years, and the first baby formula was not invented till 1860. So, and it was not even available in the United States until 1869. So that's basically only 150 years that we've even had access to this thing. Yet babies have been surviving since the beginning of time somehow. So now I know some women have issues that make it impossible for them to breastfeed, or their lifestyle just makes it inconvenient. But I promise you there's a solution, especially in this day and age. When I saw that story, I remember I Googled alternatives to baby formula, and I got pages and pages of websites where you could make your own, basically, from other things that were still available. Yet the media and lots of women and mothers were choosing to focus on something for the moment that they could not change, when their time and energy would have been much better spent just being like water and finding ways to go over, under, around, or through. Figure it out. So tearfully talking to the local news anchor person was not doing one thing to get their baby fed. And so that's one thing that water never is, and that is helpless. Even though it's soft and pliable and adaptable, water is never helpless. Water is always going to find its own way. So, and it doesn't stay, as Andrew says here, overly attached to its temporary container. Feeding your baby commercial formula that you can buy at the grocery store is a container that our particular modern society, again, only for the last 150 years has become accustomed to. But when that container gets turned on its side, if you're water, you just drop out. You just drop right out and you find a different container. You find a different way to feed your baby, because here's another quality of water. It doesn't stop flowing until it finds its own natural stopping point, which is dictated by gravity, not the container it's in. Have you ever seen a little drop of water coming down a window pane? When it hits the wood, it doesn't stop going. It just goes sideways. It just goes along the little piece of wood until it finds another place to drop down, until it eventually settles at the lowest point where the perfect balance exists. In other words, water stops only on its own terms. That's another quality of water we can adopt into our lives. No government or economy or shortage of this or that or war or whatever crisis is going on can dictate to us our lives and the quality of our lives if we will learn how to be like water and just make it through somehow anyway. So that's actually something else he talks about here. Continuing on, he says, water also finds its own level. And this is a way we can remind ourselves that we don't have to have our hands in every single thing. We can relax and let go of control because the universe is self-correcting. Okay, so the universe is a part of nature, and nature, as I mentioned earlier, is self-correcting. So just trust it. In other words, when you come face to face with an obstacle, don't let that obstacle dictate when you stop or how things will go from that point on. Trust the universe, your higher nature, to guide you over, under, around, and through until you find a solution. He wraps it up by saying anything that is unresolved or not entirely clear, still a little tangled, just let go. Be like water and let the situation find its own level. All right, so back to Raymond Tang. He opened his talk by saying that he had learned 3 important lessons from water, specifically the passage in the Tao Te Ching about water. The first was humility, because water stays low and always seeks the lowest point, as well as helping everything in its path to live and grow as it flows, never stopping to expect any thanks or recognition. Water is also freely available to anyone who wants it, as in the water itself has no mechanism by which it tells some people, you can drink me, but you can't, or you can bathe in me, but you can't. Water doesn't make that determination. It's just free to everyone. Yes, there are places where water is not readily available, but in those places where it is, it does not discriminate. It is free to everyone just the same. The second lesson he talked about was harmony, how water works with and within its immediate surroundings. It's adaptable. It doesn't let any obstacle in its way stop it. It simply keeps flowing, whether it is underneath, above, around, or through that obstacle. It keeps being itself and doing what it does. The final lesson he gives in this talk about water is openness. He says water is open to change. Depending on the temperature, water can take the form of a liquid, a solid, or a gas. Water's ability to adapt, change, and remain flexible is what has made it so enduring throughout the ages, despite all the changes in our environment. Okay, so remember, at one point we had scientists tell us at one point most of the earth was covered in ice. Okay, so water just adapted and went to the temperature change and became ice. It didn't, sit and cry that it couldn't be liquid anymore. When it got super hot, it evaporated up into gas. It just went with the flow. And that's actually the only constant in our world, change. We, like water, must constantly adapt to these changes, reinvent ourselves, refresh our skills, and remain flexible and open in order to survive and endure. We have to have a flexible faith so that every stumble a pastor makes doesn't throw us off. So that everything we find in the Bible that contradicts this other thing that says in the Bible doesn't make us lose everything we've ever believed. That's why we have to be flexible. So then he talks about the company he works for and something that they regularly do, which is have these meetings called hackathons, where they divide up into small groups and brainstorm about ways they can improve what they're doing or solve problems that they're encountering through things called hacks or shortcuts, the most efficient way to do something. And he says, what's interesting to me is that the team that usually wins is not the one with the most experienced members, but rather with members who are open to learn, who are open to unlearn, and who are willing to help each other navigate through changing, challenging circumstances. So, did you hear that? The team that wins because they are open to learn new things, new ways to approach issues, to unlearn the old ways that may have worked in the past, but that now the situation has evolved past, and who are willing to help each other coordination, cooperation, navigate through challenging circumstances. That would be the opposite of the attitude of, if you don't do it my way, I am taking my ball and going home. If you have a different idea from me or a different belief, then I am no longer willing to interact or engage with you. I'm just going to shut down and stop flowing. And honestly, for a lot of us, that's our first reaction to any sort of obstacle or circumstance, whether it's in our own personal life or somewhere out in the bigger, larger world. It's if it's not the way I want it, I will sit down right where I am and not move any further. I'm just not going to vote. Okay, I'm just not, I'm not going to participate. I will put my hands on my ears and not listen to anything anyone else has to say. Yes. So have you ever seen a child do that? They're playing a game with other kids and all of a sudden something doesn't go their way. And so, yeah, that is childish behavior. That's not becoming childlike. The good part of children. That's the childish. Yes. So it's also resisting what is, which we know does not get us very far. Now, I want to clarify that there's a difference between resisting what is and the sacred no, which we've talked about before. There's a time to say no and to draw a line, but that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about becoming so attached to the way things have been that you are unable to adapt and keep flowing, keep moving forward when you face a challenge. And guess what? Things are always, 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 always going to change. That's why it is so important to stay open. So he ends his talk with these words. Life calls each and every one of us to step up, to open up, and to cause a ripple effect. We can let the changes and challenges of life paralyze us and continue to live in our self-limiting beliefs, or we can open up and enjoy the ride because life is an amazing experience. So do you remember that illustration I gave you that time from that movie Parenthood, where they showed this scene where everybody was on a roller coaster, and some of the people, it was so uncomfortable for them to be on that roller coaster. They were like, they were scared, they were anxious, and then the camera shot moved to some other people, and they had their hands up, they were enjoying it. So life's like a roller coaster, and you get to decide whether you're going to be the person that's enjoying it and just taking it as it comes, or you're so anxious and scared and can't wait to get off. All right, so we have learned today from looking at water and using it as a template of sorts for our spiritual practice in the Tao Te Ching. What have we learned? I've been saying for a while now that our spiritual practice, those things we do and say every day, those practices we adopt, like meditation, like prayer, like affirmation, like learning how to stay in our center, learning how to pursue peace and always seek the middle way. All those things we say we believe in and have proven to lead us into a better way of life, those things are not primarily for when things are going well and running smoothly. We don't really need those things then. They are for times when it gets rough, when we come face to face with an obstacle. And our choices are sit down, put our hands over our ears and refuse to continue participating in this new reality that we find ourselves in, or find a way to flow, whether it's under, over, around, or through. And as we heard today from Andrew Martin, we can view it as a dry desert in front of us that's going to be hard and full of pain and struggle. We got to get up this huge mountain. Or we can envision those two beautiful waterfalls on either side of us where we're standing on a lily pad in the middle, taking something from our masculine and our feminine, combining it to go forward to that treasure chest where there is everything we need. Necessity is the mother of invention. If nothing ever changed, then there would never be any need to invent anything new, to evolve in any way, to progress. So let's not always view change as bad, even if it looks that way in the immediate. And for goodness sake, let's stop allowing every change and every shift that comes along to further divide us from each other. It's been going on long enough now to see a pattern emerging. Every new controversial thing that comes along that causes people to fight with each other. These are actually just opportunities for us to put our spiritual values into actual practice and not become mentally obese. You can read and read and read and say prayers, or, it's like my brother says, you can't pray for peace, but then go out and cause drama. It's like those two things are working against each other. So, are we choosing peace? Even when it's difficult, even when somebody's standing in front of you that is saying something that you completely 100% disagree with? Are we choosing love? Are we choosing to speak with kindness? Are we looking for truth? Or are we just looking for information and facts that support what we already believe? Okay? That support the side we have chosen. In times like these, it's good to remember that you can disagree with someone kindly. It really is possible. Okay, so back when Roe versus Wade had just been overturned, there's a woman that I follow on Instagram, her name, and I've read a couple of her books that I've actually quoted some of her stuff to you before. Her name's Danielle Laporte. And so when that happened, when Roe v. Wade got overturned, this is what she posted on Instagram, and I loved it. She said, "Hold steady. Many people are feeling a reeling kind of shock from the U.S. ruling against women's body autonomy and wisdom. Upon impact, breathe. Get still and alert. That way you can see the rage and the fear without getting swallowed up and made delirious by it. That's how darkness temporarily gets the upper hand. Stay in your heart, then unify with all women, pro, for, against, shocked, scared, proud, satisfied, all levels of consciousness, pain, and power. We have to move toward each other. We cannot let divisiveness split our wisdom." I love that she says that, because every single perspective, no matter which way you're coming at it from, holds some little piece of wisdom that you can benefit from. Prioritize loving compassion, and we will move through this stunning challenge with love. Okay, so that was beautiful, and that can be applied to so many other situations, not just that one. So let's also remember what Dr. Kim Duramo advises. When you come to a moment where you think you can't handle some circumstance that seems insurmountable, she says, stop and ask yourself, what else is possible here? What else can the final outcome be instead of what they're saying on the news, or instead of this negative thing my mind just jumped to, because there's still a part of my brain that is reptilian from millions of years ago. But oh yeah, I don't have to listen to that anymore. There is a higher vibration I can get to. There's a better way to do this. Spirit, help me find it. So that's what Dr. Kim says, and I love that too. I want to end with some inspirational words from Andrew Martin. I couldn't explain what I'm feeling about things right now any better than the way he says it here. He says, "Why are you selling yourself short? You have the entire universe at your disposal through your connection to spirit. So why are you still showing up small? You know, people don't have to accept you. Even politically, we've created this illusion where we believe that we can have a whole world that is cultivated and curated to our constant liking and comfort. We believe no one is allowed to call us anything other than what we prefer and to use words that we have chosen as acceptable. All of these identity politics at their core are very meaningful, but what it has turned into is a reality we have created where we expect and almost demand that nothing ever offend us or upset us or trigger us. And if it does, then we have every right to be upset and play the victim. No, there is no guarantee written anywhere in any document that says you have the right not to be offended or upset or triggered. You contain within you all of the universe. So what on earth do you have to complain about? Again, there's the treasure chest right in front of you. And I understand, speaking as someone who has unraveled my own PTSD and dismantled my own trauma response, that when you grow up in a world where everything's a nail, you become a hammer. When you grow up in an environment where everything is traumatic and dangerous, you don't necessarily how not to react immediately out of self-preservation. I get it. There is another way to live, though, but you have to choose it. And you have to want it. And most importantly, you have to remember that you are the one who will create it. You just have to say, Spirit, I'm ready. I don't know exactly what that means, and I don't know exactly where I have to go or what I have to do, but I am ready. I am ready to know who I am. That's the prayer. We have to let Spirit help us take those inspirational quotes from posters from an academic understanding to an actual embodiment of them. We have to bring those things we've learned and say that we believe into our vessel so that our entire being is infused with the truth of who we are. But remember, this is important. When you pray for patience, you don't get patience. You get the opportunity to be patient. When you pray for peace, you don't get peace. You get the opportunity to be peace. And it's the same with abundance or love or anything else in your life. So when you pray for strength And for a reminder of how strong you are, you will be given an opportunity to remember that. All you have to do is choose another way. If you always say yes, try saying no. If you always speak up, try being silent this time. Whatever thing you have not yet done, do it now. So that's what Andrew Martin has to offer, and I agree wholeheartedly. And what he's describing here is exactly what we've been talking about today. Be like water. Learn how to flow. Learn humility. Seek harmony and remain open. Learn how to let your faith be flexible so you don't have to be broken. When an obstacle presents itself in front of you, choose another path, because there's always another path. There is always a choice. Ask Spirit to help you choose wisely, and then just keep flowing. Amen? Amen. Let's stand up and end with our song that I love, Blessed Always.
Blessed always, blessed always, for the arms of God surround us. Let our joy be so triumphant that we rest in God and say Amen. Blessed always, blessed always, for the arms of God surround us. Let our joy be so triumphant that we rest in God and say Amen.
Amen. I love you. Be at peace. We will see you next week.